The neighborhood wasn't an entirely quiet one, but the noise generally belonged to traffic or chirping birds, which were, at night, replaced by chirping crickets. The city wasn't far, and almost all of the trees that lined the street were strategically placed by landscapers. There certainly weren't any heavily wooded areas, so when the news struck that a man had been killed in a vicious animal attack, it stunned the entire neighborhood. And, what was worse, the animal hadn't been caught. This placed a suburban area in a bit of a frenzy. What kind of animal was it? Oh, it had to have been big to have taken down a full-grown man. He hadn't exactly been a bodybuilder, but he was no runt either. Now, he was nothing but a reason for mothers of young children to worry even more than usual, and for the newest member of their little suburbia to stay holed up in her house. Oh, and who could blame her? The attack had happened only 2 short weeks after she'd arrived. Though, as days turned into a week, and then 2 weeks, without so much as a set of paw prints to suggest the animal was still around, things began to go back to normal. David, a resident who'd been around for a couple of years, had been one of the first to dare braving the night for more than a few seconds. He'd gotten home late after working a late shift, and, though he didn't linger for very long, the moments spent in the darkness had been filled with nothing but crisp air, the familiar sound of vehicles going by the nearby highway, and the rhythmic music of crickets playing their shrill songs. It was nice, and since the animal had apparently moved on, he decided it was about time to make an example that there was no reason to live in fear. The following night, he decided to test his bravery further, and he went for a jog around the block. Nothing. Nearly a month had passed, and the fear had all but vanished from the neighborhood. The only person who still seemed reluctant to step out more than necessary was their newest neighbor, who happened to live just across the street from him, only a couple of houses down. He couldn't help but remain curious about her. Perhaps she just valued her privacy. He was friendly with most of his neighbors, but they occasionally did get a shut-in, so he decided it was best to leave her be. This night, however, changed everything. He'd gotten home late again, and as he stepped out of his car, an unusual noise caught his attention. He turned to look, but saw nothing out of the ordinary at first. It was even easier to see clearly on this night in particular, because not only did the streetlights cut through the darkness, but so did the light from a full, round moon. It wasn't until his eyes fell on her house that he saw it. Whatever it was. He stared at the creature in disbelief. It was huge, and though it was on all fours, its movements were almost human-like. He rubbed his eyes, halfway expecting the creature to have vanished upon opening them again. Instead, he witnessed the beast slinking into the newest neighbor's house through the cracked open front door. Panic surged through him. There was no way a woman of her size would survive an attack from a creature as hulking as this. He was certain if he stood it next to his car, its shoulders would be at least as tall as the mirror. He shook himself out of his panic and ran across the street, shouting. He told himself he would stay out of her business, but that didn't include sitting back to let her get torn apart by some monster. "Hey!" he shouted as he ran up the stairs of her porch. "Hey!" He barreled past the door, but once he was inside, he stopped in his tracks and stared. The place looked like a tornado had torn through it. There were piles of broken and shredded things everywhere, and when he turned around to survey the damage behind him, he noticed the front door. The force of which he'd thrown it open had caused it to hit the door stopper and swing halfway closed. The wood was splintered, and there were thick lines running along it. Confusion and fear seeped in as he realized it appeared the large creature hadn't broken in. It had broken out. His mind tried to reason with logic. Maybe the animal had broken in through a back door and out through the front. But that meant the woman's fate had probably already been sealed. Either that, or she was hiding and silently cursing the foolish soul who had rushed in to save her. She might not even be at home. He couldn't leave any of that to chance. Taking a deep breath, he turned away from the door and was met with a pair of huge, golden eyes surrounded by russet fur. A gigantic, drooling, snarling snout was in his face, and he dizzily stared at huge, pearly white teeth. And now that he was face to face with it, he could see it was some kind of massive wolf. A wolf whose eyes were eerily human, so much so that he couldn't seem to look away from them. The growling intensified, tearing him from his trance-like state. His instincts told him to run, but before he had that chance, the wolf opened its gigantic jaws and clamped down on his arm. He let out a strangled cry, even tried to pull away, but its grip was like a vice. Pain shot up through his arm and spread throughout his body, and though he tried to fight it, he could feel himself growing faint. And then, with one last look into those huge, amber eyes, his world plunged into darkness. He awoke the next morning, disorientated and confused. When his eyes adjusted, he realized he didn't immediately recognize his surroundings, and he bolted straight up. Pain shot up through his arm, and all at once he recalled his terrifying ordeal from the night before. He stood up and realized he was still in the house, and for all he knew, so was that monstrous wolf. A voice caused him to spin around, eyes wild and afraid.
"Ah, I see you've decided to join the land of the living."
She spoke, tone almost teasing. He stared, unblinking at the woman he'd only seen from a distance up until now. "Did you scare it away? Did you kill it?" He asked the questions one after another. She shrugged.
"Something like that."
And she motioned for him to sit back down.
"Sit down, Lupus. I'll explain everything."
He gave her a quizzical look. "My name isn't Lupus. It's David." A wide, toothy grin tugged across her lips, and she stepped further into the room, drawing closer to him as she shook her head.
"No.
She stated confidently.
Not anymore."
As she drew closer, his eyes widened in shock and fear. Her eyes, large and golden, were the same eyes he stared into the night before. He'd never forget them. The one and only difference was that they hadn't been on a woman. They had belonged to the wolf.